You will not believe the story of a young girl named Amina, who stepped into a world where kindness was rare and cruelty seemed to grow like weeds. She was only 12 when her parents passed away suddenly, leaving her with nothing but a small bag of clothes and the memory of love. Her uncle, a wealthy man in his late 50s, took her in. The neighbors whispered that she was lucky, but luck can sometimes hide a curse. When Amina arrived at his sprawling compound, her eyes widened at the sight of tall iron gates, polished cars, and a house big enough to swallow her old home 10 times over. She thought this was a place where her pain would be healed. But from the first night, she learned her place, not as a niece, but as a servant. The next morning, before the sun rose, she was shaken awake by her aunt's voice, sharp as a whip. Her small hands were put to work scrubbing floors, washing dishes, and cooking for a family that never once sat her at their table. She ate in the kitchen corner, hunched over like she was afraid of taking up space. Each chore felt heavier than the last, laundry that could fill a river, endless sweeping of corridors that never stayed clean, and carrying buckets of water until her back ached. While her cousins went to school in crisp uniforms, she stayed behind to clean their rooms. Each night she fell asleep on a thin mat, her dreams fading under the weight of exhaustion. Not everyone in the house was cruel. The old gardener, Musa, sometimes shared a banana or mango with her, and the housemaid, Adiza, would whisper encouragement when the aunt wasn't around. These moments, small as they were, kept Amina's spirit alive. She learned to hide her tears and replace them with a quiet smile that even Musa shake his head in admiration. Deep inside, she held onto her parents' words. Kindness is never wasted, even when the world is unkind to you. Years passed, and Amina grew into a tall, graceful young woman. Her skin glowed like polished mahogany, her hands roughened by years of labor. Though she was denied schooling, she secretly learned to read from old newspapers Musa brought her. She would sit in the dim light at night, tracing each word, her mind opening to worlds beyond the compound walls. The more she learned, the more she understood. Her value was not defined by how they treated her. She was building something inside herself that no one could take away. One year, her uncle's business began to crumble. Bad investments and betrayal from close partners drained his wealth. The once busy compound became quieter, the cars fewer, and the lavish meals replaced by simpler fare. The relatives who used to visit stopped coming. Amina noticed the change but said nothing. Instead, she worked harder, managing the kitchen with whatever little they had, ensuring everyone ate, even when she herself went without. Her aunt's sharp words softened slightly, though pride kept her from showing gratitude. One rainy season, her uncle fell gravely ill. He became frail, his voice weak, and the strong figure she once feared now looked small beneath his blankets. The rest of the family seemed too busy to care for him, leaving much of the responsibility to Amina. She boiled herbs, prepared soft meals, and sat by his bed at night, listening to his labored breathing. In those quiet hours, he would sometimes look at her with a strange mixture of guilt and sorrow. He had taken her in as an orphan, but treated her less than family. Yet here she was, the only one willing to stay by his side when his strength was gone. One late evening, during the heavy storm, he asked her to bring him a small metal box from his study. Inside were papers, photographs, and a neatly folded letter. His hands trembled as he told her that he had wronged her, that her father had helped him start his business years ago, and without that help, he would never have been wealthy. He admitted that he had promised to care for her as his own, but had allowed his wife's bitterness to dictate how she was treated. His voice broke as he told her he was leaving something for her, a way to live a life free from the chains she had known. A week later, the house was silent, except for the sound of quiet sobs. Her uncle had passed away in the early morning hours. The family mourned, but their grief was mixed with whispers about what would happen to the remains of his wealth. Amina, still wearing her simple, faded dress, kept to herself. She was grieving, not for the man he had been, but for the man he could have been to her. The reading of the will came as a shock to everyone. The lawyer's voice was steady as he listed the properties, bank accounts, and assets. But when he read the final section, the room froze. Her uncle had left the largest property, a sum of money, and a portion of his remaining business shares, all to Amina. Her aunt's face twisted in disbelief. Her cousin stared at her like she had stolen something. But Amina sat quietly, her heart pounding. She had inherited not out of greed, but because of the loyalty and compassion she had shown when no one else would. The days after the will reading were tense. The family accused her of manipulation, of pretending to be kind to gain favor. Rumors spread through the community, but Amina refused to argue. She remembered her parents' teachings and kept her dignity, focusing instead on learning how to manage what she had been given. She hired a trusted accountant, fixed the leaking roof of the inherited house, and began a small business selling handmade crafts. She employed women from the community who had faced hardship, giving them the opportunity she had once been denied. Over the next 2 years, her life transformed. The girl who had been treated like a slave now owned her own home, ran a thriving business, and even sponsored the education of young girls in her village. Her name became known not for her inheritance, but for her generosity and quiet strength. Her aunt never apologized, but on rare occasions, she would send word through Musa asking for small favors. Amina always helped, not because she owed anything, but because kindness was the foundation of who she was. Amina's journey became a quiet legend in her community. People learned that how you treat someone when they have nothing is the true measure of your character. Her story reminded them that life has a way of returning kindness, sometimes in ways no one expects. The moral was clear. Titles and wealth fade, but the heart remembers those who were there in times of need. Inheritance is not always written in blood, but in love, loyalty, and compassion. And as she stood outside her home one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and crimson, she whispered a silent thank you to her parents. She had survived the shadows and stepped into the light. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to remember that kindness is never wasted. Like, subscribe, and join us for more powerful stories from Africa Tales and Truths.